But my work from GA4 migrations and GA4 training, I have seen two particular problems that people have spent far too long looking in the wrong places because you don't know what you don't know. And that is problems when it comes to their traffic not being attributed correctly, going into direct for GA4, or it's not firing at all. Another problem that I've had was another client that had an implementation where their GA4 data stream, we had all of their event, and everything was set up and we hit go, and then we're sat there and we're going, there's no data.
The Universal Analytics is a little bit more difficult, but there is a really nice plugin actually for Google Chrome called AdSwerve Data Layer Inspector Plus. And that will give you similar insights to what Google Tag Manager would give you, even if your tracking's not being served via Google Tag Manager.
Okay, hello my measurement to living friends. I am trying something different and hopefully this is going to work. From speaking to lots of clients and students, and everybody's trying to learn all about Google Analytics 4 and some problems that you've got, we thought, why don't we do a video version of it to make it a bit easier for people to digest the content. And my first ever way of doing this is with the wonderful Michael Patten from Launch Online. I have worked with Launch Online about nearly 2 years. I want to say 2 years, maybe it's not 2 years. Feels longer in a good way, where I've worked with Launch doing initially we did some training, didn't we, on GA4, and I've spoken at your events, and they are such a wonderful, wonderful bunch of people, super smart, super engaging. They do really good work. And me and Michael have had, we call it brain trust, don't we? Where we regularly email each other with, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Here's how we can fix things. Because as you probably realized if you're watching this, GA4 is quite a steep learning curve, which is a bit annoying. Michael is an absolute wizard when it comes to problem solving. I send my clients his way because he's a trusted pair of hands. He's done all of my consent work, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Sounds boring, and obviously we all have to say this. This isn't legal advice. This is just general marketing advice. Do what you will with it. But my work from GA4 migrations and GA4 training, I have seen two particular problems that people have spent far too long looking in the wrong places because you don't know what you don't know. And that is problems when it comes to their traffic not being attributed correctly, going into direct for GA4, or it's not firing at all. But before we go into that, I will let Michael just say a hello and what you do and where people can find you socially, and then we'll dive into this particular topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess first things first, thank you for having me on this recording. It's a great honour, and especially
you know you're wonderful.
I was going to say, it's very fortunate. I think our paths crossed, because it's really nice to find someone who's just as excited as I am about GA4. So yeah, I feel like the brain trust is working well. So I'm Michael. I'm the data strategist here at Launch. I've been in the digital marketing industry sphere around 8 years now. Started off in paid media and gradually became what I am today, creating solutions for clients. Small clients, big clients, multinationals, tiny Shopify sites, basically to help them make the most of their data, but also help them in terms of, say UX or PPC budgets, things such as that.
Well, we'll start off with one of the first problems that we've seen. And I know that this is something that I've seen with clients. In particular, it seems to be quite a problem with Shopify cookie banners as well. So I'm just going to flawlessly share my screen, which is where it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. Share. Let's see if this works. So hopefully we can see the screen. So this is a GA4 implementation, and we are in the acquisition reports, otherwise known as how do people find your website. And when we look at the default channel grouping here, you will notice at the #1 slot is direct, and it is a whopping part of their revenue. And then we fall into things like paid search and organic and email and things like that. Now you could look at this on the first pass and go, okay, Jill, this doesn't look very difficult, very different. This seems to be okay. whilst we can have a look at the same date range in universal analytics, which of course we won't be able to do after the 1st of July 2023, when we do have a look at the universal analytics, we see a completely different acquisition report where organic is actually getting all of the love and glory for that attribution, and then we go on to the other areas. Now, the client at the time was like, oh my God, like what's happened? Because the whole point of analytics is you're trying to invest in your setup and the uses of building those reports so that you can build some sort of measurement dashboard that shows what are you doing, how's your strategy working, how's your marketing working for you. And this was not attributing correctly when everything was getting bundled into direct. So the first thing that people do, and it's a quite logical thing to do, I think, Michael, isn't it, is to go, right, let's go and have a look at development and go into Google Tag Manager and have a look at the tags and the triggers and everything and whatever. And actually, this was a Shopify website and they were using the Shopify cookie banner. And then I had a look at other clients that had the exact same setup and the same problem was happening. And I'm like, interesting. And then a brain trust conversation with Michael where I'm going, this is weird. Why is this only happening in Shopify? And it turns out that and throw in, if I do phrase this the wrong way, universal analytics, when somebody went on these Shopify websites and they clicked the consent, because obviously we want to honor people's consent mode. We're not here to do any dark art marketing. We are here to honor people's choices. And universal analytics was firing as a page view. And that's why universal analytics was doing what it should be doing. But GA4 did not fire until the second page. And because of that, there was nothing to link it to, was there, Michael? So everything got bundled into direct and none, which is the bucket for direct. And that's why this client in particular was having a problem. And the solution wasn't to go in and reconfigure all of the configuration tags or anything. It was the cookie banner not playing fairly with GA4. Another problem that I've had, and I haven't got a slide to show on this, so I'll just stop sharing on that one, was another client that had an implementation where their GA4 data stream, we had all of their event and everything was set up and we hit go, and then we're sat there and we're going, there's no data. And then there's a caveat that it can take up to 72 hours for data to show in GA4. So we were like, maybe it's that, because we could see some of the data in the dev tools, it was firing, but 3 days later, there's still no data. And we're like, what's going on? And it turns out that their cookie banner, again, it was a cookie banner problem. It was working for universal analytics, but it was not firing any data layer events for GA4, but it was sending ghost events into the data stream, which is great for the modeling, but not great when you're not looking at the data. So if you're looking at your GA4 implementation and one of your questions is, why is all my traffic direct? Or another problem is, where is my data? Like, why is it not showing? One area that I would like you to start to investigate is the cookie banner, because having a cookie banner on your website, one, doesn't make you compliant. You know, you can have a cookie banner and it doesn't actually do what it's meant to be doing. And I'm also finding with this transition from UA to GA4, even though it's now 2 years old, the software hasn't been updated to work for GA4, which is common for, I think, quite a few things. I mean, they've had ages, Michael, so I don't know why they've not done this. So if you are finding yourself in this situation, this is where we're going to borrow the brain trust from Michael, all of the information in Michael's head. If I am a website user, I'm a GA user, and I'm having this problem, I'm going, traffic's going to direct, that shouldn't be happening, or there's no data. Talk to me like I'm 5. How do I find out what's going on with my cookie banner?
Right then, let's see, because there is, I guess, quite a long process for diagnosing this. But right at the very beginning of that, if you're seeing, as you've described, a discrepancy between universal analytics and GA4, first got to figure out via which method those platforms are tracking. Use Shopify as an example, and it's a good example because there's lots of pitfalls, lots of things that can go wrong with a Shopify site when you introduce a complex mechanism such as a cookie management platform. But Shopify made it very easy for us to track via universal analytics just by going into shop settings, putting in your UA number, so your UA property tracking number, and then it would handle everything for you. So it automatically populate all these e-commerce events for you and things like that. However, by doing it via this method, you are actually serving universal analytics server side. So not in the traditional way, it's being handled almost off-site, if you like. With GA4, because Shopify, or at least they don't yet, offer the same option for you to put in your GA4 measurement ID just into the settings and it handle it all for you. If you want GA4 on a Shopify site, you have to do it in the more traditional way, which is client side. So it's everything is very much working within the user's browser on the site. So you've got a difference in how things are being served. Another thing with sites like Shopify is when it comes to tying in consent controls, not just with a cookie management platform, but with Shopify itself, there's lots of moving parts there as well. So commonly what you find if you've got a big discrepancy between GA4 and UA is that the cookie banner is blocking GA4 for people who don't want cookies to be served to them, but UA has no way of knowing what they've chosen, and that's going to function normally regardless. And of course, not only is that not compliant, but it's going to cause a headache when it comes to the detangling of your data.
So is there a way is there like developer tools that you could be using to find it? I don't know if we can get you to do a little live demo of what do you do when you're looking, if we go, there's a problem and you just have a quick 5 minutes of having a look to go, well, this is what you're looking for. This is what it means. Because I think personally, I don't think nobody wants to touch this stuff because they're scared because it sounds a bit legally, and it does go into the legal side of your data management. But I also think it feels really complicated, and I'm not to disregard the complexity of doing the job, but it feels like, well, there's a barrier to learning. So is there a way that people can check as soon as they've watched this video what's going on with their cookies to see if something is firing in the right or the wrong way?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're using Google Tag Manager for your tracking, you're already at an advantage because Tag Manager has a built-in debug window, the Tag Assistant, and you can see what exactly is firing at each moment in the page load sequence. And if it doesn't fire, it should give you an indication as to why. If you're using GTag, the universal analytics is a little bit more difficult, but there is a really nice plugin actually for Google Chrome called AdSwerve Data Layer Inspector Plus, and that will give you similar insights to what Google Tag Manager would give you, even if your tracking is not being served via Google Tag Manager.
And when it comes to the kind of process of looking at this, is this something that anybody can do, or is it you have to give it to a developer or you have to give it to an agency to look at in terms of diagnosing the problem?
Oh, yeah, I mean, there are advantages to using an agency as they, like ourselves, I've got lots and lots of clients and we do this day in, day out. But in theory, so long as you go into it with an investigative mind, be your own little detective, if you like, it's it's fairly straightforward.
He says, fairly straightforward. Can you walk us through what is best practice then in terms of the perfect solution? I mean, we can use just to like, I'm amazing. Let's throw my site under the bus for this. So I employed the agency at launch to do this for me because I'm like, I was busy, and I'm like, also, I mean, I do analytics, so I want to make sure that my cookie consent mode is working. So if you were looking at what does good look like, what should a website owner be looking for, and we can use my example as a use case as to why you've set up my site in a certain way, in terms of the rules and some gotchas with things like those ghost settings, things like that. I don't know if we can throw it up on the screen and then you can see how you would look at this, or is it just a talkie through?
In fact, I've got a little, here's one I made earlier type.
Oh, nice. Blue Peter mode. Here's one I made earlier. Love that. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, cool. Let me just get my screen sharing for you. How's that? Am I broadcasting?
Yes, I can see this. Wonderful. Go.
Amazing. Right then, I'm going to give you a little look into my test website, would you believe? And this is a test Shopify website, so it has all of the problems that we described just moments ago, if you like. So here we are. It's a very, very out-the-box, not much content going on Shopify website. It's my T-shirt store, would you believe? And let me zoom in a bit, because that is a massive, great screen I've got on the wall there. So prior to this call, I made sure to clear all the cookies, and I did that first because if you do clear the cookies on this, it does log you out of Shopify. So, so I thought I'd keep yourself logged in for the time being. But this is what you might see typically if you use Shopify's own cookie banner or potentially a third-party platform, is that you've got this tiny little banner down here, not really getting in the way of anything. As a user, I can go about my business without expressing whether I want cookies or not. What at least the current rules state, and have done for some time, is that you shouldn't set any cookies upon landing on your website until a user has explicitly expressed their consent. So for someone that's following those rules, nothing would have set here. GA4 shouldn't have fired a page view, say. So if I go about, and I'm afraid these T-shirts aren't for sale, these are T-shirts I've made, so I don't, infringe any copyright law. I made them on my phone using emojis, so they don't really make sense. Let's have a look at this T-shirt, say. Lovely T-shirt. Maybe let's have a look at the full catalogue. Maybe I'll see if they're based in the UK. Oh, it doesn't say. That's a shame. Let's go back to the catalogue. Oh, I better accept cookies, actually. If I accept cookies now, of course, GA4 hasn't been firing that whole time. So if I accept cookies now, it's going to think that I've landed on this page. It'll think this is the first page in my journey. But not only that, but any traffic source information, such as source medium and by extension, default channel grouping, is going to be lost. That's all contained on the first page view, not the page views that follow. So right now it thinks I've landed on this page and I've come directly, whereas actually I could have clicked a paid ad that took me to the home page. So that is, the classic reason for that being a discrepancy, or a discrepancy point between platforms, or potentially reflected in both platforms.
And that's what we saw with those screen grabs that I shared at the beginning. That example where all that traffic was going into direct is because of the way the cookie banner was set on for GA4, that so much traffic was getting bundled into direct because the consent banner wasn't firing the way it should have been firing for it to record that information.
Absolutely, or at the very least, again, we're not legal experts, but from what we know with the regulations is that you can put an overlay over that banner. So when a new user first lands on the website, they have to say whether they want cookies or not. And that is compliant under the current regulations. So if you want to ensure, or certainly data accuracy and even the volume of data that you can capture, is to make sure that that's the first thing they do. There's one school of thought which thinks, it's a bit annoying. Every new site you go to, you have to interact with this cookie banner. It sort of jars the experience a bit. But there's another school of thought where actually it is important that the user can say whether they are happy to be served cookies or not straight away, and then their experience is tailored right from the first step there.
Because you're trying to find the balance, aren't you? Like, obviously, as marketeers, we need some data to understand what should we be doing with the website in terms of our marketing strategy, our content strategy, your product strategy, your services. Like, that's why you're using analytics. And you need to balance that with the permission of the user that's landed on that website. And by having that interstill, nothing's firing in the background, is it? So there's no page view firing, nothing is loaded, and you can't end up having, like you showed there, a user that can go on the website, play around, buy it, whatever, and then you don't get any of that data because they just ignored the banner. And I do that sometimes. It's so annoying. I'm like, I'm just going to get on with my day because it's not intrusive enough to kind of go, no, you need to make a choice here, yes or no, just pick, like, because you have a choice, it will work in terms of you'll get the data and you've honored the preference of that user as well.
Absolutely, yes. And I guess it's important to point out as well, having an overlay is fine, but saying accept our cookies or we're not going to let you buy anything is against the regulations. So don't be doing that now.
Don't be that person. Be nice. So when you've got this, then how do you fix it so that you don't have that problem?
Yeah, sure. In fact, let's get into the diagnosis of it, and let's assume that we're not using Tag Manager for this one. So this method will work whether you're using Tag Manager or GTag. So if I pop open my developer console here, I've got the plugin running for the Data Layer Inspector Plus, which is available on the Chrome store. That's a unpaid recommendation there. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just benefit from their tools on a daily basis. As we can see here, it's got, in fact, I say see here, I need to zoom in so you can probably see that. We've got all of the things, all of the events that are reaching the data layer when we land on that website. As we said before, the GA page view, so Universal Analytics, is firing that page view when it shouldn't be, and that's because it's firing from server side, and this cookie banner here is not set up to control things server side. So there's problem number one. UA is working as normal. We are breaking our compliance rules, if you like. So if I then do what I did and go through a few pages like this, we can see that there's lots of things going on in the data layer, but we aren't seeing any activity from GA4 at all, which again is the problem we'd see if we had no overlay and had not explicitly expressed our consent preferences at the beginning of the journey. Now, if I hit accept all cookies, in theory, everything that's set to fire when it's allowed to should fire, but it doesn't. We don't see any activity here from GA4 until we go to our next page view. So that's going to load in, and now we can see, or should be able to see, whether it's functioning. Hey, there we go. It got there eventually. We've got our GA4 events coming in, and first up is our page view. But because it's only come in on the page view after we've accepted the cookies, we're going to have the same problem. And the reason that that is happening is because we haven't got any logic involved that says when a user has accepted those cookies, the tags that were meant to fire upon page load can now fire. For this example, this test website, I'm using a very popular cookie management platform called OneTrust. A lot of them are quite similar in behavior for this very event. When you express your consent using the banner, it will output an event basically saying that the consent has been updated, and you can use this data layer event as a trigger to fire the things that should fire upon landing. And that's how you get around that problem. GA4 should spring into action upon accepting, and for the page views that follow to have it function in a normal way.
You make it sound so easy. So with consent banners and this logic, talk me through the logic, because I know we had this with my site, didn't we? That we're not talking about the logic of consent just for your Google Analytics platform. It's also the logic for things like, I don't know if you're using Google Ads or Optimize or Hotjar or Forms or HubSpot or things like that. That cookie logic needs to apply to all of it, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And quite right. In the eyes of the Information Commissioner's Office, I think that's it, the ICO, anything that is non-essential to the website experience, especially things that track users, are deemed non-essential cookies, and therefore they need to be turned on or turned off depending on what the user wants out of their website experience. So it will be not only analytics cookies, but things that are used for marketing and targeting purposes, even non-essential functions. Say if you have like an iframed in Google Maps embed, if that's going to set non-essential cookies, track a user's activity, in theory, if you have to block out that map embed, then you should be, because it's not stopping them from buying anything or logging into their account or speaking to an agent via chat. So
and another problem that might come about as well, I'm guessing, I mean, this is a guess, if you don't have your consent banner firing on those logics, it's possible then, I'm guessing, if somebody doesn't opt in, that if no GA4 data is sent, you are going to have a discrepancy with the event counts that you get in GA4 to another source of truth. So I'm guessing here with things like HubSpot, if you're completing form completions as an example, if those logics and those events aren't firing, you might have GA4 saying you had 50 people complete a form and HubSpot says 90. And there's always, isn't there, the age old, why doesn't it all match up? I've always said that like Google Analytics isn't a CRM tool and it isn't your e-commerce platform. Like your source of truth for that will always be Shopify for your e-commerce, and HubSpot as an example as the source of truth for your total lead gen. Analytics is meant to be a marketing performance tool. Having said that though, there's normally a variation, isn't there? I normally see anywhere between 5% difference. Sometimes it's a 2% difference in that variation between what the source of truth says and what analytics says. However, this is a problem I think that is happening a lot more now because of GA4, because of consent. We didn't have this 10, 20 years ago. You do have that problem. If there's no events firing, then your GA4 event could be way out, 30, 40, 50% out, depending on how that consent banner has been firing.
Absolutely, yeah, and you're quite right. Back when I started in the industry, very carefree days, if you wanted Google Analytics, you just stuck it on your site and away you went. So not only do you have the educational piece of the differences in how Universal Analytics and GA4 tracks by design, but when you throw in consent into the mix as well, then it's quite a headache. Absolutely.
Talk to me about consent mode with Google Analytics, as I've definitely seen this as being maybe a friction point with clients, that they think that having a cookie banner also means that consent mode has happened, and thinking more around, this has been a problem, hasn't it, for people in Google Ads in particular, that they were told, no, you need to make sure you get all your consent mode for your remarketing and things like that. Consent mode, in your opinion, what is it, and how does that link in with your consent banner platform?
Got you, and you're quite right. It has been massively confusing, the communications between the CMP, the cookie management platform providers, and Google themselves. You think consent mode's been available for use out of beta, I think, for like over a year. It's still now, people are still getting to grips with it. So hopefully I can boil it down to its essentials for you. So where you have cookie management platforms, and traditionally, if a user says, no, I don't want to be tracked via analytics or marketing cookies, that previously would be data that was just lost. That's gone, that's untrackable, that's in a black hole. And the best you can do is figure out, if you do have a good cookie management platform, it will tell you the proportion of users that didn't accept cookies. So you can say, looking at the proportion that did, we can model the activity of those that didn't. What consent mode will do to take some of the manual labor out of that is, if it's set up correctly, indeed, it will still fire basic information about a user that hasn't accepted cookies via cookieless methods. So a method they call pings. So send basic things like, traffic source information, have they viewed pages, have they converted? And you'll still get that either come back into your accounts at a later date, or it will use that information for modeling automatically using machine learning methods to automatically add that to your reports instead.
And that's what GA4 offers, isn't it? One of the benefits we've seen about GA4, as you pointed out, that you previously in Universal, you just didn't get that information. Whereas if you have consent mode alongside your cookie management platform, then GA4 is going to help you understand what your users were doing, how they got to your website, what they were buying, but without actually having that client ID, that information about them. So it's almost taking the weight of their clicks without telling you who clicked on it, I guess, which is going to be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And consent mode works for GA4 and Google Ads. You can integrate Universal Analytics, but it doesn't work. I think it was something they were doing. Then they realized they were going to move to GA4 anyway, and just kind of,
put it in the bin, set it on fire. Yeah. So with, I know I do a lot with analytics, obviously, just for those that have Google Ads as well. What was the kicker with consent mode and Google Ads as well? Because we had a dinner, didn't we, at the event, and you were like, oh, my clients have been getting these alerts to say, if you do this thing, or we're going to suspend your account. That was related to consent mode as well, wasn't it?
Right, that was related to consent, full stop. And this is well, it's an ongoing conversation, shall we say, with Google. It's been escalated a few times. What Google is getting very good at detecting is whether you are not compliant and you're serving those Google Ads cookies in a non-compliant way, which, of course, leaves you at risk for, fine and legal action yourself. But I imagine that Google would be under fire if they're, allowing their cookies to be set in this way. So I believe it's through the remarketing tag. It can do this detection, if you like, and that is speculation. Don't take that as pure fact. What I've observed in the code. But yeah, if they detect you're non-compliant, they say, right, we've detected this and we need you to be compliant by this hard deadline or your account risk suspension. So we've had a few of those emails come through. We've then assisted our clients in becoming compliant by that deadline. But even after that, we're seeing their remarketing and their conversion tags are being blocked and they're not tracking, even though we've essentially done what they've said. And that is, an ongoing issue. This has been going on all year so far. So what we're saying to clients now is, don't leave it that late until you get served this notice, because it can be really disruptive. Make sure you get your data and your consent levers, if you like, sorted out right now.
I mean, it's saying something, isn't it? When you say Google suspending them, like, we won't serve your ads. So that's Google saying, we're not going to take your money. And it's like, whoa, when were Google ever going to say, we're not going to take your money? That's how seriously they're taking it.
Absolutely.
And I think I was doing a debrief this week actually with a migration plan, and the client said, oh, we had one of these letters from Google. Well, I say letter, email, you know what I mean? We're now compliant, but they still had problems with their analytics showing. And it was trying to get around it, to go, just because you got a tick box to say that one area might be compliant doesn't mean another area isn't firing properly. So I think wrapping up then, going through your top tips of, you know, you open up your browser, you know, even if it's, did you have a process like writing down who's the consent management platform, the name of that tool that you used for people to find, to see what's firing and what's going on, having a look at your universal analytics? What's your kind of best practice if you're investigating and fixing this? What are the bullet points of your report, so to speak?
Sure. So I guess if we take it from the very first day, if you like, oh dear, we're not on top of this, we need to do it. First things first would be to make sure that your tracking is already singing off the same hymn sheet. If you've got discrepancies in how it's firing already, that's only going to compound problems later down the line. So step one, make sure if your Google Ads remarketing tag is meant to fire on all pages, make sure it's firing on the same triggers or in the same place or in the same bit of code space, if you like, if you're not using Tag Manager, for both analytics and ads across all the platforms that you use. And then when it comes to integrating a cookie management platform, there's lots on the market, all different prices, all different functions. I would certainly recommend one of the ones that's recommended by Google. It's not a surefire way of getting a good one, but it will certainly point you in the right direction. The third point from there then would be to consider who's doing that implementation. Something we found, and this isn't knocking developers as a whole, because there's, you know, lots of different developers with lots of different backgrounds that we work with. But what we tend to find in the past is some developers, and in, you know, it's a development way of looking at things, is developers get given code snippets, they pop them on the website, and then they go, there you go, off you go, test it. But of course, if you don't know what you're testing, that can lead to some problems again later down the line. So I think you need to either educate yourself or partner with someone who knows what they're doing in terms of the consent process. Even though there are consent management platforms that have auto-blocking technology, so they say, you know, take all the legwork out, we'll do it automatically. Those tend to be quite over-enthusiastic in what they block, and you find that it blocks useful things as well. So I think you really need to be aware that you need to tailor your setup to work correctly, because it can go either way, non-compliant or blocks far too much for its own good. And then from there, assuming that using those steps, you've got a nice compliant setup and all your tracking is firing accordingly, then it is the education piece. Don't just look at your analytics platforms. Also look at the dashboards within your consent management platform, especially if they offer you insights into the proportions of people opting in and opting out. Because when you go to your client or your internal stakeholder and they go, why is all our traffic falling off a cliff? You can say, actually, it's not a bad thing, because we have all this intel about that missing data. Why is that missing? Was that useful data? It might not be. Actually, the useful stuff has been retained very well. And this is what we can see through the whole picture, if you like.
Any other gotchas that you've seen that you found with the whole migration process of GA4? So putting a tiny pin in the consent mode stuff. Is there anything that you've seen, I guess, with maybe your e-commerce sites or your lead gen sites that are easily fixed? Or because it feels like there's we're trying to get to this question, like, feels like that there's a lot of third-party tools that should be playing nicely with GA4, and they're just not yet. And we're recording this in November 2022. We're 9 months away, 8.5 months away, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, where's all the integration, like stuff that would fire events? If you just put the UA code in, you would get event data in Universal, but they haven't yet done this for GA4. Have you found any annoying gotchas and solutions around that?
Oh, there's got to be quite a few. First one off the top of my head is where Google say, we've gone to our consent management platform partners and we've made sure that their platforms are all updated so they do consent mode automatically. And then when you look at it, they're doing some functions of consent mode, but not others. And it still relies on them. They recommend putting G tag on the page. to handle the initial consent functions, which is great, unless, of course, you're using Google Tag Manager, where you want to be avoiding G-tagging and hard coding to keep things nice and flexible, where you add to them and amend them later down the line. So I guess the first thing is, if the consent management platform says it does consent mode, make sure that it actually does all of the consent mode functions. Otherwise, you might still want to do it in a custom way.
Completely the topic, isn't it, about G-tag and Google Tag Manager, and like, oh, Google just making things more complicated than they should be. This has been really, really interesting. I'm hoping people that watch this go, that's interesting. Where can they find more information out? Either they know they've got a problem and they can go to you, and caveat here, they've fixed my stuff, and for clients, if you do want some help in navigating this launch, you have this as a service, don't you? So, you know, plug it where you can. You're giving us all this lovely information. On your site, is it the /data? What was the URL? Like, it's in your navigation, is it, under the analytics side of launch?
That's a very good question, actually, because I think we're getting a bit of a website refresh this week.
Okay. So what's the website then for launch?
Launchonline.co.uk.
UK. And Michael can be found on LinkedIn. Michael Patten. I'll put this in the footer of our video so people can go and follow you and all of the wonderful things that pop out of your head. Speaking of wonderful things that pop out of your head, I know something you've been working on at the moment. What have you been working on, Michael? Just as a little teaser of why people should follow you on LinkedIn for your wonderful brain. What have you been fixing? What things have you been working on? I know the answer, so I'm just getting you to say it.
Yeah, so after being, I guess, quite frustrated with some of the tracking methods available for Shopify, particularly for GA4, where it's all a bit, certainly there's no integration available. Third-party tools sort of help, but not quite hit the nail on the head. I came up with my own solution, which I called Lolly Liquid, which is a loving tribute to our launch's mascot, Lolly the Frog. And that will unlock a lot of the GA4 events that you'd need. So, view item list, add to cart, begin checkout purchase, all of the main e-commerce ones in the native format, not only for GA4, but Google Ads, Facebook Ads, even Universal Analytics, and done so with the least amount of moving parts. So in theory, there should be less to break. So that's something we're now offering to clients. Something that's thrown a really tiny, if you like, a slightly significant spanner in the works is that Shopify, the Shopify Plus users, are updating their checkout. So I'm now having to make an adaptation there, but it will still work for Shopify Plus clients. It's just the add to payment and the add shipping info events need a little update. But that's something you can come to us for. Relatively easy process, and be happy to help you through that if like myself, you have been frustrated with a lack of data or potentially incorrect data coming through into your analytics platforms from your Shopify site.
Clever person. Clever. Right, well, that's been really, really useful. I hope that's been useful for other people. And thank you, Michael, for your time this morning. It's been lovely to have a little chat. Love having our little chats, but we've just basically recorded it, basically.
Thanks for having me, as always.
All righty. Well, thank you ever so much, Michael. We'll do another one of these hopefully soon.
Thanks, Joe.